Hi everyone, my name is Raj Dasani, and I'm currently a third year student at UC Berkeley and a trumpet player for the University of California Marching Band, otherwise shortly known as the Cal Band. As you may have seen from the title or the music video that was released, this is the charting perspective for our very first show of the 2020 season, known as the Nickelodeon Nostalgia Show. What we hope to show in this video is the insight to what really went into charting this show and the individual pictures, which is otherwise what we call as stunt sheets, as reference to our charting committee known as STUNT. So whether you have never seen a marching band before or you're a member of the Cal Band, potentially interested in joining STUNT in the future, this is going to be the video for you. So without further ado, let's get into the creation of the Nickelodeon Nostalgia Show. I hope you guys enjoy. So the unique part of Cal Band is that it's in fact student run, which means that from the creation of the entire show, it takes the efforts of many students from the start of it to the end to really even create the show before delivering it to the band to perform. So how it starts off is that any student can make a cut tape, which is simply a compilation of songs based off a theme that interests the author of such cut tape. So around February of this year, Savannah, a first-year tenor player at the time, submitted a compilation of Nick theme songs in the order of iCarly, Drake and Josh, Fairly Odd Parents, Jimmy Neutron, and Victorious. Then, along with 70 other cut tapes, the band votes on their favorite ones. After a period, STUNT, along with their Musical Activities Committee, otherwise known as MAC, chooses from the best from the top ones, based off of A, how unique they are, but B, how performable the arrangement actually would be. Once the themes are decided, a member from each committee works together to edit the cut tape, based off of which songs best translate to the field, and other factors such as which maybe have copyright that we may not be able to use. So after the deliberation with somebody from MAC, Jaime, a current senior trombone player, we decided to change up the songs and the order slightly based off of what we think made sense. Starting off with the cartoons with the intro, just the intro to Spongebob and the full Fairly Odd Parents theme, and then have Big Time Rush, Zoey 101, Drake and Josh, and an iCarly's Victorious remix to end it off. The two biggest changes made from the first is A, selecting Big Time Rush and Zoey 101 over some popular cartoon themes such as Jimmy Neutron and Danny Phantom. The two biggest reasons were A, for some potential copyright issues with these specific songs, but also B, because of the translation that these songs would have potentially on the field. These songs, we found that non-cartoon songs, especially when it comes to Nick, have a more playable band feel to it, whereas cartoons really didn't have that, a lot more of a monotone kind of feel. So therefore, we chose to really focus on Big Time Rush 101 for those songs that a bit more casual for the entire show. So then secondly, we also chose to end it off with an iCarly / Victorious remix in order to have a longer song at the end and bring a little spice that we hadn't really actually seen any other marching band do before. So now with our music set, it gets split off into two different parties. So first is the music, which for this time, the music was actually arranged by our director, Matthew Sadowski. And once he finished it in around October, the music was sent to bandsmen to record and submit to MAC, who ended up compiling the music together. And then on the other strand is the charting of the show and also creating the music video, which is going to be what this video is really about as we detail our thought process in this. So let's get into it. To start us off, we're going to talk to the organizer / the leader of STUNT, aka otherwise known as the drum major of the Cal Band, Mary Mijares. And we have her joining us. Hello, Mary.
Hello.
What's up, Mary? How are you doing?
Doing good.
What is that process between like show finalization to like start of charting? Like, or any advice? Like, what do you think about? Like, what did you think about when you go from a show, like from the idea of a show to like starting to chart it and put it together? What do you think about them?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of questions that come up when you think about like, okay, like which show do we do for homecoming versus big game versus like the last show maybe for all the seniors, right? And I think we have to think about the impact that the show could make on the field. It's not that, or like shows that other marching bands haven't done. Like what's unique, what's different. And I think that plays a really big part into maybe the shows that would get put into games that will have more people. And also, like, what just sounds like a cool theme that people can get behind? What show can we use props for? What shows can we have dance blocks for, right? Impact. I know for last year, Sam Aguilar and Josh Berg, they chose Shakira to be a homecoming show. And I think that was a really right move because everyone knew who Shakira was. And everyone, once they heard that intro, they were like, oh my gosh, it's Shakira.
Now we have the show and we want to start like charting it. So I think one thing that I asked you a bunch of times, because I had roadblocks, just like any good project, you have like, or any big project, you have roadblocks in thinking, right? And so what is your biggest advice in terms of like idea generation? Like what should we chart and like what do you do when you get stuck?
Yeah, I think just looking everywhere is the main thing to do, right? Like whether that be asking people outside of your committee for ideas because they might have something to offer that you might not have necessarily thought about. Asking different people what they think about your show once you tell them about it. Like what feelings does it evoke? What memories does it bring up? But also for me, I really love watching other marching bands. I think I get most of my inspiration and charting from other marching bands. You know, not to say like I copy different things, but I definitely emulate the style of charting that other marching bands have done, right? Whether it be like step 2 drills or images. I think there's a lot to be said with different kinds and different styles of marching bands and how they perform on the field. So for example, like HBCU bands, they like to perform on the field. It's fun to watch them. You know, like they have step 2 drills that look really cool, but I think the main thing that differentiates them from other marching bands is that they're so fun to watch because they have fun when they play their instruments, they dance, right? It's super dope.
Definitely,
and
yeah.
I think even when charting my own show, I think that's what people really love to see is when the bandsmen on the field that are marching the show look like they're having fun, you know, because you'll have fun watching that. In terms of actual images and imagery on the field, I definitely have a lot of inspiration from Ohio State. They chart a lot with symmetry, and it's very crisp and very clean the way that they get from image to image. And I feel like I've definitely found a lot of inspiration with that in terms of like charting with lines and then having it dissolve into an image that people know. And an image that people all around the stadium can see and recognize. I think that's one of their main strengths. So I have a lot of inspiration from them.
Because also Nick's obviously not like a very small topic. There's people who've done like different kinds of, who've done shows that were like Ohio State like did the SpongeBob show, and there are other bands who've done Nick related shows. So watching those were definitely inspirational for sure. Thank you, Mary. Obviously, there's a lot to think about, and in these next couple of videos, next couple of minutes, we'll detail each song and the stunt number that helped create, bring it to life, and how it came to life, with a lot of Mary's words coming as the headline of what we were thinking. Now that we have our song set, one little thing that we wanted to add in the beginning, for like the start of our show, was this little reference to SpongeBob and the call and response that SpongeBob had. Obviously, SpongeBob is probably the most iconic show when you think about Nick. But the reason why we didn't want to make this a full song or even like a bigger part of the show was because so many other marching bands had done SpongeBob and a SpongeBob show, most popularly Ohio State. And therefore we want to distinguish between, but still have that reference there. And the stunt member here that's going to help me chart this part was Yueyi. What's up, Yueyi?
Hello, Raj. What's up?
Hey. Between me and Yueyi, the first idea that we both came up with was the pirate, and Yueyi spearheaded creating this initially.
The first version was literally just a screenshot from the SpongeBob cartoon, and we just traced it on Couchhare Viewer. And then we were like, okay, so there are a few details that is not that visible on the field. So basically what we did is we get rid of several details, make the pirate figure more clear, but still it doesn't translate that well. So we tried a second and a third version. But after that, we're still not satisfied with this. So we went back to the cartoon. And the next thing is there is a pineapple showing up. It is SpongeBob's house, and that is very iconic. So we tried to just like try it out, and it turns out pretty good.
This took almost a bit longer than I really expected, just because I think both of us really wanted to see, like, try to get the pirate to work in some kind of way. And one thing I think that's pretty clear, and I think a theme that we're going to go through pretty much the entirety of these next couple songs, is that the most direct way is usually not the best way, especially with CalChart, because as much as we love like the top-down art that we usually do when we're drawing, which in general, with CalChart, there's the verticality that we need to think about, where from the student perspective's audience, they'll see the east side, which is what you guys see at the bottom of a top-down view, but they'll see those dots or those people more, and therefore the top will therefore be a bit smushed in terms of being the details. Yep, and that is SpongeBob. So that first 16 beats starts off the show, and now we're gonna get into our very first song, Fairly Odd Parents. Now we're gonna get into our very next song, but our first full song, which is The Fairly Odd Parents. And here, who worked on me mostly to create this song into its existence, is Raymond. What's up, Raymond? So Raymond, did you like watch Fairly Odd Parents growing up at all?
Yeah, no, it was one of my favorite shows. Definitely top 10, maybe top 5, I think.
So obviously, yeah, similar with Raymond, I definitely watched this a bunch when I was a kid. Pretty much one of the most iconic like ideas about Fairly Odd Parents is Kondo and Wazma. Obviously, two of the most iconic characters are Cosmo and Wanda. This is what I initially created, and while it was okay from the view of the audience, it didn't look great from a top-down view.
I had a little bit of a different idea. I went with more like I'm a straight line guy, and so I went more straight lines with the stars. Instead of having the wands move, why not we do the iconic part where the wands glimmer? And so I doubled up the lines. You might be able to see at the top. It's nice to see that elements of that were put in the final thing.
One thing that I had an idea on is that instead of having the shining effect, which was kind of what the lines were, because that idea of a star and it shining was going to come in, it's going to come in later, and you guys will see that later. So therefore, with this one specifically, I wanted to make it maybe more magical, right? Maybe have them like create something. And therefore, I wanted to make the stars as big as possible. So I incorporated Raymond's pretty much structure of his dots, pretty much to a T in terms of the lines and the spacing, except I just made them bigger so that, yet again, because from the east side, it's a lot harder to see things that are farther away. I made the stars as big as possible. And therefore, from both the top-down view and also the audience view, the wands were pretty clear, and they looked pretty proportional to how they were in the show. So now with the wand set, we started to move them down. We wanted to, at some point, to the beat of the music, hit the lines or hit something, and then create something. But what's the one thing that you usually say, or like people like I think often say when like they're trying to like emulate magic, especially kids? It's like poof, right? And that's one thing that the show used, right, for one of the character of Cosmo and Wanda's baby, Poof. I created this Poof stunt sheet, which I think actually probably the first stunt sheet I created. Also, one thing for the Cal Band people watching is also one of our most iconic steps is mini military. And when we do mini military and like our counts for it, we start off by saying poof, and therefore it all just seemed like to work together. It all seemed like it made too much sense to put it all together. So that's where I really liked it.
The stars really aligned for that one. Too perfect. Landed on a plate for you. You just have to use it.
Now that we've finished Fairly Odd Parents, we're now going to move on to Big Time Rush, our first real life show from Nick. The one stunt member that was going to help me with making this song and bringing this song to life was Esther.
Yeah, so basically I made a big ol' drum set complete with I think a snare, like snare drum, bass drum, and a small cymbal. And I had inspiration from just the fact that it's a band and like what's like the most iconic image of a band, like beyond the people themselves, it's the drum set. And I thought when I was making it, there's a lot of space in the middle of the bass drum itself. And so I wanted to add a little bit more to it. And I remember in our ABBA show from a couple years back, we had a huge clock that would move around, and I was like, whoa, wait, it's Big Time Rush, big time. So I decided to add a clock, and if it moved, that would have been really cool. I think Raj did add that. And so, yeah, the biggest fear was being able to have everything like fit together on the field, but by playing around with dimensions and lengths, it managed to work out pretty good.
When Esther showed me this the first time, like the big time thing was incredible. I love wordplay. I think, as we saw also with Fairly Odd Parents and the Poof. So the time and the Big Time Rush, the band was amazing. It was way better than anything I had thought of. So this was like, yes, a definite add. This ends up leading into something that, yet again, I really wanted that color flash in some kind of capacity. And when you think about big time, like a Big Time Rush, when we went to those words, big time, the only time I think we say any direct words throughout the show. So I used this for this time. Therefore, I wanted to spice it up from just saying the words. So right when the music goes big time at the very end, like da 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 da, big time. And then as those go, that's when the flashes happen, as you guys can hear in the music. On to our next song. The fourth song that we chose, as stated before, was Zoey 101. And it was a late add-in, and maybe arguably the least popular show of our set. But the person on STUNT who joined me to making this song happen was Elise. Hello, Elise.
Hi.
I had actually watched a fair few episodes, which is probably where the bias in me adding into it. But in terms of like iconic images, there's not too much that I like thought of immediately. In terms of what's iconic about Nick in general was the blimp. The late 2000s and the early 2010s, this became like the product of Nick. With that and slime, but between the two, slime was not really like
not really chargeable.
So then once we decided that we wanted to do some kind of blimp, we made two different blimps. I think I created this one, as you can see here, but it was just a general blimp, no words, nothing. And Elise, how'd you make yours?
So the blimp, as you can see here, 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 and there. Have fun editing that, Raj. I guess since we have a limited number of dots, I wanted to make sure that we got the lettering on as opposed to getting a super accurate shape. But in the end, I think mine kind of looked a bit like a goldfish. So what we ended up doing was compiling Raj's shape and my lettering into sort of a baby of a stunt sheet.
So we had the blimp. Obviously, getting to it would take a couple beats, but the Zoey 101 song is a bit longer than our other ones. So what did we decide to do with it?
Blimps typically sail in the sky. It's a pretty simple thing. It's just people sort of even stepping together, and just the blimp comes down towards the audience, which I think makes a pretty cool effect. Sometimes we need to get somewhere without exactly staying on the grid that we usually march on. And in that case, we do something called even step, where everyone could just get to an arbitrary spot in just a certain number of steps or a certain number of beats.
And then we have it switch, and we transition into a pretty classic but standard Z101, as you see here. For me, at least, a reason why I really like this stunt sheet is that it looks the same on both sides of the field, which is something a bit underrated. How the Memorial Stadium is split up usually is that we have all our students on the east sideline, as the view that you're currently seeing. But you can also flip it, as you can see here, to have it be on the west side, which is where the alumni usually sit. So that's Zoey 101. At least, do you have any other last notes, thoughts about how the song, the show, the stunt sheets?
Collab of the century. Greatest stunt sheet collab of all time.
Now to move on to our very last theme song, but not our second to last song. We're going to go into the ever most popular Drake and Josh. And the two people that helped me create this part of the show was Hannah and Yueyi. Welcome, guys. Hello. So the initial idea that I had for this, as a huge fan of Drake and Josh, the first thing I thought of was like the Hug Me Brother. Before I assigned this, or like I asked Yueyi and Hannah to help me out on this, creating this was a struggle, right? It was, as you guys see right now, it's meshing up this two people together. It was just weird, especially because, yet again, from the audience perspective, what do they think it is, right?
My first draft was kind of changing it from stick people more into like these pill-bodied people. They're very interesting looking. The upper half of the body, didn't look that cute. I was pretty angry about it. So we went back to stick people. Oh my God, we were Googling stick people hugging for so long. And like, it didn't even look that good in like a drawing. So we were pretty confused. I mean, I got to a point where I got them to look like they were jumping toward each other. And just kind of looking like they're hugging, kind of overlapping, but the overlapping, didn't look that cute. So I think that's where we settled on just having them kind of just go closer to each other for the idea of a hug, right? Not necessarily like a direct hug.
So my story is I was on stunt Zoom, and then I saw Hannah, and I was like, yo, I got you, bro. So Hannah just sent me the stunt sheets. I saw a lot of ideas. And then I was like, man, this is also for me. So I decided to have a better time for myself first, and just think about like, hey, if Drake and Josh is on like the field right now, what are they going to do? And the first thing popped into my mind is actually this. So that is actually what I did. I just charted two figures punching each other's faces. And then I was like, hey, they're already punching each other. What about a karate kick? So I just made one of them try to kick each other. I created like a ton of stunt sheet for just like the fighting movement. And I was like, wait, they're going to hug each other, right? So I just kind of bring them back and try to hug each other. But yeah, that was my part. I was just kind of like having fun with the two figures and like really brainstorm about what can happen between them two.
Well, I love the karate kick, and I think we all did. For the simplicity of the show, and also for the sake of the marchers who would have to march that, I think we ended up taking that out. But I think that has to be number one honorable mention in terms of show stunt sheets that we ended up taking out. But the last step was putting it together, and like we said, because this is usually not our type of marching, this was, I think, a very essential part of putting it together was making sure it syncs up to the music, so that when we transition from one part of it, the people, to the next part, it's intuitive that the marchers do it at the 8 beat at like a certain time. And so this starts off by the very first image, where when that left body starts moving forward and it hits that it hits the head. The second it hits the head is that first like crash transition. So it's gonna take some time to realize.
Wow, that's singing.
And then like there's like a clash, and I think that's when that first clash is when it hits that head. Even small details like that make it so much easier for a marcher to be able to be like, hey, okay, the second I hear this is when the head starts moving. Putting that all together ended up making the song probably the most complicated, but also probably the most like one people can look at and be like, whoa, like this would be so fun, right? This is like really exciting to look at. Now with Drake and Josh done, we are done now with all our direct theme songs, and we're going to transition over to our main ender with ICarly and Victorious. Leave It All to Shine.
Wait, recursion. Oh my God.
Okay, we have gotten through our first 5 songs already. However, in terms of time, we've only gone through around 2/3 of the show, or even less. One of our very last song here, which is Leave It All to Shine, is the remix between ICarly and Victorious, as we mentioned before. But most importantly, the length of it is something that I really liked. So this one probably had the most creative juices. And therefore, with a lot more creativity, we're gonna have 2 people with us. Welcome back, Elise and Mary. Hello, guys. In terms of thinking about the process, we really split it up into 2 parts of the songs. If you listen to Leave It All to Shine, like that first half is really more of a back and forth between the two, almost like 2 separate songs that are really just cut together. Whereas like the third song, like the second half, is like really like a remix. So we started with the first half.
There is kind of a back and forth between the 2 songs, so we thought a cool way to incorporate this was to have like an image that represented iCarly and an image that represented Victorious, and have them come together maybe in some way or just bounce off of each other. So so the big thing about iCarly, I guess, is the sort of filming camera kind of stuff. So I got inspiration from our favorite platform, Zoom, and did this kind of thing. And then Victorious, I did a cute little eighth note right here. And I thought having these two images on the same sort of stunt sheet would be cool.
We played with like how we can move the two images, right? From like moving one down and one up to like having them flash to like maybe changing them to like bigger versions of each other. For the last song, I really wanted to see if we could really get like some interesting like visions, and who better in terms of creativity to ask Mary how to put it all together.
For me, I thought what would be interesting is to have the image associated with the actual show come up when the singer was singing it. So when Tori was singing, I had the music notes come up, right?
Do you want to quickly touch upon like the lines, right? What do the lines do?
Yeah, I think it's there's something really aesthetic about simplicity and symmetry whenever you chart. It's refreshing to have a buffer in the middle, just having simple lines, and then have it dissolve into something else. And it's like, oh, wow, how did they do that?
We were at somewhat of a roadblock, at least for me, because I was just like, how do you make this pop? And then that one night that Mary was like, I got it. And I was just me patiently waiting for 2 hours offline, seeing what she would put together. And it was awesome. I loved how she brought it up. So yeah, we go from the lines to the music, to the zoom, to the clapperboard, and Mary timed that so that the clapperboard would hit exactly when we have the second half of the show. A lot of the images that I wanted to focus on were things that connected the show together. The remix really is representative of like how these two are, while they're separate shows, they had a lot of overlapping characters, and they also had like resembled universes in some kind of ways. We really wanted to use that and really embody that with these stunt sheets. So we started off with the Paraphone.
To be honest, I didn't have too much trouble creating this. I think from the field view, it looks a little weird because the field view kind of distorts it, so it looked very like bottom heavy. But I think from the top down view, it's pretty simple, and I just used a reference image, which we can just do through the CalChart program. So I just kind of copied the dots onto it.
From the Paraphone to go into maybe the stunt sheet that we thought of last. Between us three, who are pretty big fans of the show, we talked about, hey, like what are some references to the show, right? Like what can we put into here? And I think at one point one of us stumbled upon the idea of like, there's a lot of like relationships within the shows. I'm either team SETI, which is like Sam and Freddie, or I'm team Creddy, which is like Carly and Freddie, and like shipping them together. I also watched a bunch of Victorious, and while maybe not as explicit as iCarly and not as direct, Victorious had versions of these, if anything, multiple. But yet again, the love triangle idea is something that I think maybe teen Nick shows like really like to play on, and therefore was something that I wanted to throw in there.
It's one of my favorite stunt sheets in the show. I think it's so cute.
Yeah, it's for the fans. That's what I really like about it. Okay.
Good job, Raj.
Thanks. Cutting that out. And finally, we go into our last stunt sheet, which, if anything, I think was maybe one of the first stunt sheets that we created for the show. Just because from the song "Leave It All to Shine," I knew I wanted to end with something like powerful in some kind of way. Yet again, I was having struggled in terms of how to make this as interesting as possible. Therefore, yet again, who do we go to? Mary.
I was just playing around with different ideas, playing around with the numbers, with the blocks, and I was again inspired by what we've done in the past in terms of like marchers crossing over each other. So it this is essentially that same concept where we have everyone just like squished together into one block, and then they all like expand. And as people expand, you also expand the sound. So should we have actually like performed this in the field, it would have had that effect. And then Raj added this really like cute thing in the middle of it where we like go back and forth with the leave it, make it. So they go back and forth, right? And then we go into the star.
It's almost like a curiosity when everyone gets to that block. They're like, what happens next? And then you start seeing everyone like crossing over each other. You're like, yo, right? Like, how are they doing that? How are they not hitting each other?
Just a little tidbit. I was showing the show to someone, shout out Corey, and the star at the end, he thought it was supposed to represent Patrick because it started with SpongeBob, or it started with the pineapple, and he thought it was Patrick at the end.
There's different meanings.
But
But,
hey,
yeah, it could be both. It could be both.
let's say we planned it like that, right? No one needs to know, but there you go. So that is the idea and the charting of the finalization of the shows. Now we'll kick it back to me and Mary just to talk about how we're going to put it together and how it's going to lead into our final show. Now that we have all 6 of our songs charted and ready to go, now we have to put it all together. Where not only to put it together with the transitions, but also we have to put it together in a format that is presentable to everyone and most specifically our members, so we can start practicing it. So here we brought back Mary to talk about this process and what exactly goes into that.
Yeah, overview, we put everything together, all the stunt sheets together. We have all the paths lined up, make sure everything's right, and then we put everything into what we call a Cal chart viewer. And then from there, people can generate their continuities and their paths, and that's one way we use one thing we use so that everyone knows like where to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. So if you want to be in that process, at newer Cal band members, join STUNT. But I think the biggest question though that I think everyone has outside of marching bands, right, is okay, cool, you have this show, right, and like you put it together and you put the dots together, right, and obviously there's a lot that goes into that, but arguably maybe even the harder part is getting 200 plus people to like either like learn a show in maybe even less than a week, right? And while we didn't get the chance to do that this year, you got a little taste of that last year with your own show, Shakira. So how exactly is that process, right? And like, what's the mindset of going into it from the start of the show to the end in terms of planning it out, spacing it out?
For context, rehearsal usually runs for an hour and 30 with music rehearsals at the very beginning, and then we get into the marching portion. We really like to break it down into different steps, right? So that it's not so overwhelming for everyone else. We also try to hold people accountable and make sure that they mark out their paths beforehand so that rehearsal can be really, 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 really productive. For context, again, the drum major typically gets on top of this like really huge scaffold, and then I would tell people to run different parts of the show, bits and pieces. And then at the very end of the day, we have everyone run everything together, playing and then walking through their show or like marching through their show. Right, so it's all about pinpointing what the band has trouble with, rehearsing those, and then trying to combine it together with other aspects of the show.
Let's say during a game week, we have a Monday rehearsal, which is 2 hours, but that's purely music. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have an hour and a half, but half an hour of that is dedicated to either music, announcements, and all that. And then Friday and Saturday during game weeks are usually the way we finalize our shows. And that can therefore only lead to I say only, but at least relative maybe to other marching bands, but that's 6 hours. And for maybe like 40 stunt sheets, so that means like 40 different directions or paths that you have to memorize for each of like the 150 to 200 members that are marching that show. Obviously it's a lot, but it's also a lot of just trust in the individual members, right? It's really, that's what really makes this band come together almost, because everyone has their own show, their own unique dot to memorize, right? No 2 dots are the same, right? And which makes it even better. And everyone, when they have to put that together, that's the fun of the process. So we've talked a lot about the charting and the music, but there's so much others that happens around it. One of my personal favorite ways is the banner. And to show one of the coolest aspects of game day, here is Juliana. Welcome, Juliana.
Hello, thank you.
So Juliana, what do you do like on game day or for a show in general?
Okay, so game day are kind of a big day for my position because I photographed the band on the way up and like throughout the game day, but I also am in charge of the banner. The banner, for those of you that don't know, is just a huge piece of canvas paper that has our halftime show and a really cool sort of Cal band integrated into the show visualization.
Yeah.
You might see this in the stands during our halftime where the band sits. We have some band members holding on to it. So my process this year was a little different than normal years, because for a typical season, I would be given a huge, maybe 3-foot by 6-foot banner to kind of work on and paint and everything. But without the constraints of the size, I was able to put a lot more detail in making like a small one, because it's all going to be digital, so I can blow it up or make it as small as I need to fit any online setting. Mm-hmm. So generally, when starting a banner, you take into consideration like the show, what is the show about? And then you start thinking about how you can incorporate the band into those topics.
I really like, for this one specifically, in the selfish trumpet way, I love the trumpet Cosmo was holding. That was cool. I liked it. It's like the small details when you get to like look at this. It's like, oh shoot, right? And then like, oh, you're like, oh, it's just the SpongeBob background, but then you see the Campanile, you see the Memorial Stadium, like super cool stuff.
And if you didn't see it, there's a little wedge marching towards the
thank you, Juliana. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the show or anything? Also, I just saw Seder Gate. Oh gosh, the more you see it, the more you look at it, you're like, oh shit.
And I tried my hardest to make, so there's like 4 little buildings right in front of, like in between Seder Gate and the Campanile, and I based it off of Unit 3. So, because I'm Unit 3. I'm
see,
Unit 3 kid.
so okay, super small hints. I love to see it. Okay, nice. And there it is. That's just a short, high-level overview of everything that went into the process of making this video. Thank you for those who stick along to this point. Now we're just going to finish off with a full recording of the show, but purely just the stunt sheets and the images. This is what we do theoretically March in a regular season, and what we usually show to our members before we get on to practicing. But before we end off, I would like to give a thank you to every single person involved. Please go check out the description to see mainly the list of people who really made this product as great as it was. But overall, I really want to stress that this video is not about the individual credit, but this band is one, and what we're able to do as a family, as a community, regardless of the situation. And I really have these people to thank for what this really came out to be. I really hope you guys enjoy. Thank you guys for watching. And of course, go Bears.
Are you ready, kids? I can't hear you.
I